Hi everyone, welcome back. Today's video is about the menstrual cycle. If you want to skip to any particular section of this video, you can do so by clicking the timestamps found in the description section below. Please also make sure to like and subscribe as this helps us out a lot. Okay, let's get to the video. Intro to the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle is a finely tuned physiological process governed by a complex interplay of hormones, primarily involving the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and ovaries. It typically spans approximately 28 days, but it can vary between 21 to 35 days in different individuals. The cycle is divided into 4 distinct phases: menstruation, follicular phase, ovulation, and luteal phase. These phases are regulated by a delicate interplay of hormones. This is known as the menstrual cycle. At first, learning about the menstrual cycle can be daunting. This video hopes to distill it down and create a comprehensive resource to simplify and better understand the menstrual cycle. So, this video will be broken down into the following sections: hypothalamus, pituitary, and gonadal axis, which is also called the HPG axis, hormones, source and function, menstrual phase, follicular phase, ovulation, luteal phase, and the interaction between the menstrual cycle and the HPG axis. Several points will be reiterated through this video under each section of this video in order to help you understand it better. Hypothalamus, pituitary, and gonadal axis. The menstrual cycle and the HPG axis are intricately linked systems that regulate the reproductive function. The HPG axis consists of the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and the gonads. In women, the gonads are ovaries. It coordinates the release of hormones necessary for the menstrual cycle's progression. The hormones include gonadotropin-releasing hormone, abbreviated as GnRH, follicular-stimulating hormone, abbreviated as FSH, luteinizing hormone, abbreviated as LH, estrogen, and progesterone. Let's specifically learn about the source and the function of each hormone. The gonadotropin-releasing hormone is released by the hypothalamus in a pulsatile manner. It functions to stimulate the release of FSH and LH from the pituitary gland. Follicular-stimulating hormone, abbreviated as FSH, is released from the anterior pituitary gland. It functions to stimulate the growth and development of ovarian follicles in the ovaries. Luteinizing hormone, abbreviated as LH, is released by the anterior pituitary gland as well. It functions to trigger ovulation, the release of a mature egg from the ovary, and the formation of the corpus luteum. We will discuss about the corpus luteum later. Estrogen is primarily produced by the developing ovarian follicles, and it mainly regenerates the endothelial lining of the uterus. And finally, progesterone is produced by the corpus luteum after ovulation. It functions to maintain the endometrial lining of the uterus for potential fertilization and implantation. Now let's start with the phases of the menstrual cycle. First, we have the menstrual phase. The menstrual phase signifies the start of a new cycle. It's marked by the shedding of the endometrial lining of the uterus, which is triggered when implantation of a fertilized egg does not occur. This phase typically lasts 3 to 7 days and results in menstrual bleeding. The start of this phase is hormonally triggered by a drop in progesterone levels. Let's consider the hormonal landscape of the menstrual phase. If fertilization does not occur during the previous cycle, the corpus luteum, which forms after ovulation, begins to degenerate approximately 10 to 12 days after ovulation. The degeneration of the corpus luteum leads to a significant drop in the levels of progesterone and estrogen. Both estrogen and progesterone levels are at the lowest during the menstrual phase, as the corpus luteum has degenerated and there is no active follicles producing significant hormones. The shedding of the endometrial lining results in menstrual bleeding, starting a new cycle. As estrogen and progesterone fall, the negative feedback on the hypothalamus and pituitary gland are lifted. This leads to a gradual increase in the secretion of gonadotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. In response to the rising gonadotropin-releasing hormone levels, the anterior pituitary gland begins to increase the secretion of FSH. The rise in FSH is crucial for the recruitment and development of new follicles in the ovaries for the cycle that's beginning. LH levels remain relatively stable but low during the menstrual phase. The primary focus is on follicular recruitment driven by FSH. Then we have the follicular phase. The follicular phase is the initial stage of the menstrual cycle beginning on the first day of menstruation and ending with ovulation. Concurrent with menstrual phase, the follicular phase extends from day 1 to approximately day 14 on average. The follicular phase is characterized by the maturation of ovarian follicles and the preparation of the endometrial lining for potential implantation. Let's consider the hormonal landscape during the follicular phase. The follicular phase begins with menstruation, which is triggered by a decline in progesterone and estrogen levels from the previous cycle. The low levels of these hormones cause the endometrial lining to shed, resulting in menstrual bleeding. Low estrogen and progesterone activates the hypothalamus and releases gonadotropin-releasing hormone in a pulsatile manner. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone then stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to secrete FSH and LH. Follicular-stimulating hormone is crucial for the recruitment and development of ovarian follicles, as was mentioned before. Multiple follicles begin to grow, but usually only one becomes the dominant follicle. This follicle is called the Graafian follicle. The other follicles undergo atresia. LH also supports follicular growth and maturation, although its levels remain relatively stable during the early follicular phase. Towards the end of the follicular phase, rising estrogen levels prepare for the LH surge that will trigger ovulation later. As the dominant follicle matures, cells within the follicle produce increasing amounts of estrogen. The rise in estrogen levels regenerates the endometrial lining through cellular proliferation and thickening of the lining to prepare the body for ovulation. It is during this phase that the concept of positive and negative feedback become important. The amount of estrogen determines the type of feedback. Moderate levels of estrogen exert negative feedback on the pituitary gland, inhibiting further FSH release to ensure that only one dominant follicle continues to mature. When estrogen levels peak, they exert positive feedback on the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. This positive feedback results in a surge of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which in turn triggers a surge of LH, setting the stage for ovulation. Now we have ovulation. Ovulation marks the midpoint of the menstrual cycle and occurs around day 14 in a typical 28-day cycle. It involves the release of a mature oocyte, which is also known as an egg, from the ovarian follicle. The developing follicles secrete higher and higher concentrations of estrogen. Late in the follicular phase, estrogen concentrations reach a threshold that paradoxically results in a positive feedback. This causes gonadotropin-releasing hormone, luteinizing hormone, and follicular-stimulating hormone levels to spike. The LH surge induces the final maturation, release of the oocyte from the dominant follicle, a process known as ovulation. The release of the oocyte is captured by the fimbriae of the fallopian tube and begins its journey towards the uterus. Let's consider the hormonal landscape during ovulation. During the follicular phase, the dominant follicle matures and secretes increasing amounts of estrogen, as was discussed before. Estrogen stimulates the thickening of the endometrial lining in preparation for potential implantation. As estrogen levels rise and reach a peak, they switch from exerting negative feedback on the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland to positive feedback effect. This positive feedback triggers a surge in gonadotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. The surge in gonadotropin-releasing hormone leads to a sharp increase in the secretion of LH and a smaller increase in FSH from the anterior pituitary gland. The LH surge is the key hormonal event that triggers ovulation. Approximately 24 to 36 hours after the onset of the LH surge, ovulation occurs. The mature follicle ruptures, releasing the oocyte into the fallopian tube. And finally, we have the luteal phase. After ovulation, the luteal phase begins. The ruptured follicle transforms into a temporary endocrine structure called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum secretes progesterone, which maintains the thickened endometrial lining and prepares the uterus for the implantation of a fertilized egg. Remember that estrogen helps regenerate the uterine lining, but it is progesterone that maintains it for implantation. The high levels of progesterone again cause negative feedback on gonadotropin-releasing hormone, follicular-stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone, preventing the ovulation of multiple eggs. If fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum begins to degenerate approximately 10 to 12 days after ovulation. The degeneration of the corpus luteum leads to a sharp decline in both progesterone and estrogen. The drop in progesterone and estrogen causes the endometrial lining to break down and shed, leading to menstruation. This marks the end of the luteal phase and the beginning of a new menstrual cycle with menstruation. If fertilization occurs and the embryo implants into the endometrium, it secretes human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. This is abbreviated as HCG. HCG maintains the corpus luteum and its production of progesterone and estrogen. This prevents a decline of these hormones and thus maintains the endometrial lining necessary to support pregnancy. Now let's consider the interactions between the menstrual cycle and the HPG axis. Specifically, let's consider the feedback mechanisms, corpus luteum formation, and the LH surge and ovulation. When it comes to the feedback mechanism, let's consider estrogen and progesterone. Throughout the menstrual cycle, estrogen and progesterone levels fluctuate. These hormones exert negative feedback on the hypothalamus and pituitary glands. However, sometimes when certain thresholds of these hormones are met, they can also exert positive feedbacks. Estrogen and progesterone inhibit the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone from the hypothalamus. Gonadotropin-releasing hormone is a key hormone that stimulates the pituitary gland to release FSH and LH. Estrogen and progesterone also inhibits the secretion of FSH and LH from the pituitary gland. This negative feedback mechanism ensures that hormone levels remain within a certain range, preventing excessive stimulation of the ovarian follicles and regulating the time of ovulation and menstruation. When it comes to the corpus luteum formation, typically around day 14 in a 28-day cycle, there's a surge of LH secretion from the pituitary gland. This surge in LH is triggered by rising levels of estrogen. As the ovarian follicles mature, they produce increasing amounts of estrogen. When estrogen levels reach a certain threshold, they exert a positive feedback effect on the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. This leads to the release of a large amount of LH. The LH surge is crucial for triggering ovulation. It stimulates the release of a mature oocyte from the dominant follicle in the ovary. This surge marks the peak of fertility in the menstrual cycle, as ovulation allows for the possibility of fertilization and conception. Following ovulation, the ruptured ovarian follicle transforms into a structure called the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum secretes progesterone and some estrogen. These hormones play essential roles in preparing the endometrium, that is the lining of the uterus, for the potential implantation of a fertilized egg. Progesterone helps to maintain the thickened endometrial lining, making it suitable for implantation. It also supports the secretion of uterine fluids that nourishes the embryo. The presence of the corpus luteum and its hormone secretion maintains the hormonal environment necessary to sustain a potential pregnancy. If fertilization and implantation occurs, the developing embryo secretes human chorionic gonadotropin hormone, which supports the continued function of the corpus luteum. And that's it for this video. I hope this video was helpful for you. If it was, please make sure to like and subscribe. See you in the next video. Bye!